A German officer shoved a gun into his stomach and told him to surrender. 80 enemy soldiers stood behind that officer. Leonard Funk was completely alone. 5 seconds later, 21 of those men were dead, and the rest were surrendering to him. This is not a movie scene. This actually happened. And what Funk did in those next few seconds was so violent, so unexpected, that it saved his entire company and earned him the Medal of Honor. Some moments in history seem so improbable, they just defy belief. They feel less like a documented event and more like a scene straight out of a blockbuster movie. These are the moments where the odds aren't just long, they're impossible, where survival seems unthinkable and victory is a complete fantasy. But for a few individuals throughout history, these moments weren't fantasy. They were reality. This is the story of one of those men and one of those moments. A man who, when faced with overwhelming odds and certain death, didn't just survive, he attacked. Imagine this. You're a first sergeant, a soldier seasoned by the toughest fighting of the war. You've just led your men on a brutal 15-mile march through a blinding snowstorm deep into enemy territory. You fought house to house through a frozen Belgian town, and, against all odds, you've won. Your understrength company, which you bolstered with headquarters clerks you turned into frontline fighters, has captured an incredible 80 enemy soldiers. The battle for the town of Holzheim should be over. You've done it. But then, as you move to mop up the last pockets of resistance, everything goes terribly wrong. A German patrol, appearing like ghosts in the snow, surprises your small group of guards. And those 80 men you just captured, they're now free, armed, and furious. You walk around the corner of a building and straight into their midst. An enemy officer steps forward, his face a mask of cold victory. He shoves the steel barrel of a machine pistol hard into your stomach and, in a clipped, guttural voice, orders you to surrender. You are one man. They are over 80. Your 4 guards are now prisoners. Your main force is scattered, completely unaware of the disaster unfolding. This is it. This has to be the end. What do you do? What can you do? For First Sergeant Leonard Funk of the 82nd Airborne Division, this wasn't a hypothetical question. It was the crushing reality of January 29, 1945. And what he did next wasn't just unexpected. It was unthinkable. It was an act of such audacious, shocking violence that it would not only save his company, but would also cement his name in military history forever. To understand the man who stood in that frozen courtyard, you have to know where he came from. Leonard Alfred Funk Jr. wasn't born a giant. In fact, standing just 5.5 feet tall, he was physically unassuming. But inside that compact frame was an iron will and a natural gift for leadership that earned him the nickname Napoleon from his men. Born on August 27, 1916, in Braddock Township, Pennsylvania, Funk grew up in the tough, working-class world of the industrial Pittsburgh area. He graduated high school in 1934 and was working as a clerk when the world started sliding into war. In June of 1941, before Pearl Harbor even happened, a 24-year-old Leonard Funk was drafted into the U.S. Army. From the very beginning, it was clear Funk wasn't made for a quiet life in the rear. When the Army created its new elite airborne forces, Funk volunteered without a second thought. He embraced the brutal training of a paratrooper, earning his jump wings and an assignment to Company C, 1st Battalion of the 508th Parachute Infantry Regiment, or PIR. Formed in Florida, the 508th was a new unit, but it was filled with men just like Funk, tough, determined, and ready to fight. In late 1943, they shipped out to England, where the 508th was attached to one of the most legendary formations in the U.S. Army, the 82nd Airborne Division. Stationed in England, the tension built for months. The paratroopers trained relentlessly for the invasion everyone knew was on the horizon. For Funk, now a seasoned NCO, this was the time to forge his men into a cohesive, deadly team. The Airborne was a special breed. They were all volunteers, men who chose to jump out of perfectly good airplanes, often behind enemy lines, to fight surrounded and outnumbered. It took a unique kind of courage and an absolute reliance on the man next to you. Leonard Funk didn't just have that courage, he inspired it in others. His first taste of combat came on June 6, 1944, D-Day. As part of the massive armada crossing the English Channel, the 508th PIR was to jump into Normandy, seize vital causeways, and create chaos behind German lines. The jump was a nightmare. Intense anti-aircraft fire and thick clouds scattered the paratroopers far and wide. First Sergeant Funk found himself nearly 20 miles from his drop zone. To make matters worse, he'd badly sprained his ankle on the landing. For many, that would have been it. Lost, injured, and deep in enemy territory, the smart move was to hide and wait. But that wasn't Leonard Funk. Ignoring the pain, he started gathering the scattered troopers he could find. He put together a small group of 18 men and, acting as the lead scout himself, began a dangerous 20-mile trek through hostile land. They moved by night, navigating by instinct and starlight, constantly dodging or fighting through German patrols. After several grueling days, Funk led every single one of his men safely back to friendly lines. For this incredible feat of leadership and sheer will, he was awarded the Silver Star. But his trial by fire was far from over. In September 1944, Funk and the 82nd were called up for Operation Market Garden, the daring Allied plan to seize a highway of bridges in the Netherlands. Funk parachuted into Holland on September 17th. During the intense fighting, Allied gliders carrying reinforcements were being ripped apart by a battery of 3 German 20mm flat cannons. The guns were chewing up the vulnerable aircraft, threatening the whole operation in his sector. On his own initiative, Funk grabbed 2 other soldiers for a 3-man patrol to take the guns out. It was a suicide mission, 3 men against 3 fully crewed anti-aircraft positions. With what his citation would later call great courage and intrepidity, Funk led the charge. He first attacked and drove off the German security team, then led a direct assault on the gun positions themselves. In a furious, close-quarters fight, Funk and his 2 men killed about 20 of the German crew members and silenced the flak guns for good. The gliders landed safely, their men and equipment preserved. For this, he was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, the nation's second-highest award for valor. So by the winter of 1944, First Sergeant Leonard Funk was already a highly decorated combat leader. He'd earned a Silver Star, a Distinguished Service Cross, and 3 Purple Hearts for wounds sustained in combat. He was known as a man who led from the front, someone you could count on when things got bad. He was, by any measure, a hero. But the act that would make him a legend, the one that would earn him the Medal of Honor, was still to come, in the frozen hell of the Battle of the Bulge. The courage shown by men like Leonard Funk is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. These stories of heroism aren't just history, they're powerful lessons in leadership and sacrifice. If you believe these stories are important and need to be told, take a moment to subscribe and hit the like button. It helps us make sure these legacies aren't forgotten. Now, let's get back to the frozen forests of the Ardennes. December 1944, Hitler launched a massive, desperate surprise attack through the dense Ardennes forest. This was the start of the Battle of the Bulge. The initial German onslaught, helped by snow and fog that grounded Allied planes, punched a huge bulge into the American lines. The situation was dire. The 82nd Airborne, including Funk's 508th PIR, was rushed to the front to stop the bleeding. They entered a landscape of pure misery. The men fought in waist-deep snow and sub-zero temperatures. Frostbite was as much of an enemy as the Germans. By late January 1945, the tide was turning. The Americans were on the attack, pushing the Bulge back one frozen town at a time. On January 29th, the objective for Company C of the 508th was the small Belgian town of Holzheim. The day began with a grueling 15-mile march through a driving snowstorm. Just as they prepared their assault, the company's executive officer was wounded. Without hesitating, Funk stepped up and took his place, becoming the effective second in command. Looking at his depleted platoons, Funk made a classic Funk decision. He knew they were too weak to take the town alone. So he went to the company headquarters and rounded up every man he could find: clerks, cooks, supply guys, men who normally worked behind the lines. In the middle of a snowstorm, Funk turned these pencil pushers into a new combat unit. With artillery crashing down, Funk led his newly formed assault force forward. The attack on Holzheim began. Under Funk's leadership, this ragtag group, alongside the 3rd Platoon, stormed into the town. They fought house to house, kicking in doors and clearing out defenders. The ferocity of the attack overwhelmed the garrison. In a stunningly successful assault, Funk's group cleared 15 houses and captured 30 prisoners without a single American casualty. Soon the whole town was overrun, and they had about 80 German prisoners. But this created a new problem. The company was so understrength they could only spare 4 men to guard the large group of prisoners. It was a risk they had to take. This is where the victory almost came apart. A German patrol stumbled onto the scene. They surprised and quickly overpowered the 4 American guards. In an instant, the situation was reversed. The 80 prisoners were free and armed. They now formed a dangerous force of nearly 100 men, deep inside a supposedly secure town, perfectly positioned to smash into the rear of Company C. It was at this exact moment that First Sergeant Leonard Funk, his sweep complete, walked around the side of a building and straight into the hornet's nest. The scene was a nightmare. Where there should have been prisoners, there was now a formidable enemy force, and his 4 American guards were on the ground with their hands on their heads. Before Funk could even process the shock, a German officer stepped forward. He jabbed a machine pistol, likely an MP-40, brutally into Funk's stomach. The officer barked the order to surrender. This was the impossible moment. Funk was alone, facing at least 80 to 1. Death was a certainty. Surrender was the only sane option. Disobedience was suicide. And so, Leonard Funk began to surrender. He looked at the German officer, maybe gave a slight nod. He began to slowly, deliberately unsling his submachine gun from his shoulder, as if getting ready to hand it over. For just a fraction of a second, the Germans around him relaxed. The American was giving up. It was a natural, human reaction. It was also the last mistake many of them would ever make. In that instant, Funk's slow movement exploded into what his Medal of Honor citation calls a lightning motion. He wasn't surrendering the gun, he was bringing it into action. In one fluid, devastating move, he brought the muzzle of his submachine gun up. He pulled the trigger and didn't let go. The gun roared, riddling the German officer and killing him instantly. But Funk didn't stop. He held the trigger down, sweeping his weapon across the shocked and bunched-up ranks of German soldiers. The surprise and sheer violence of his attack created absolute chaos. As he emptied his magazine, Funk started yelling at the 4 captured American guards. "Seize the enemy's weapons!" he shouted. Jolted into action by Funk's incredible one-man assault, the guards sprang to their feet. They grabbed weapons from the Germans Funk had just cut down and joined the fight. The one-man ambush had become a 5-man counterattack. The ensuing firefight was a brutal, close-range brawl. When the shooting stopped, the courtyard was a grim scene. 21 of the German soldiers lay dead in the snow. Many more were wounded. The rest, utterly broken by the sudden, savage violence, threw down their weapons and surrendered for a second time. The captors were, once again, the captured. First Sergeant Leonard Funk, through an act of almost unbelievable audacity, had single-handedly neutralized a threat that could have wiped out his company. He had faced down impossible odds and won. The fight for Holzheim was finally over. The impact of First Sergeant Funk's bold action was immediate. If that force of nearly 100 armed Germans had remained free, they would have caught Company C by surprise and endangered the entire operation. Funk didn't just save himself, he saved his men. For his incredible bravery in Hotheim, First Sergeant Leonard Funk was awarded the Medal of Honor, the United States' highest decoration for valor. President